Hello, welcome to Youth TV. Thanks for joining us today. My name's Julia, and it's great to be with all of you. I know I can't come to Youth anymore because of basketball, but it's great to see that you guys are all watching this video so I can still connect with you. During this series, Zach is going to be interviewing some people with expertise in different areas in learning, alongside us as he asks us questions on our behalf. In today's video, he's going to be sitting down with Kat Anderson to talk about mental health and faith. Personally, I know I deal with anxiety and it can be really hard, so I'm excited to go through this video with all of you. I hope that this video helps you and that you guys have a great week.
Well, Kat, thank you for joining us on Youth TV. This is Kat Anderson. She is a director at Reach Trauma Response Consulting. And for those who are not familiar with Reach, let us know a little bit about what you do as an organization and what your role is within that.
Great, thanks a lot. I am a principal of Reach Trauma Response Consulting, and I take care of the spiritual aspect of crisis intervention and the mental health component of our organization. So I am a spiritual director, and I also do crisis intervention, trauma response.
Right on. And you're not only someone who has experience, but you're someone that I've known for a number of years, and you've taken the time to pray for me, to listen to me, to give me advice. So you're someone that I not only know is effective for others in that, I know the impact you've had in this community, but I've also experienced that impact personally. And I think the people who are listening today will find that even through a camera lens, they'll get a sense of the acceptance and kindness and grace that you bring. It's very obvious everywhere you go. So I'm grateful that you're taking the time to engage in this conversation with us.
Well, thank you very much. I hope to live into that.
Yeah.
Your big words.
So one of the first things I want to start with, just as a bit of a framework for the rest of this discussion, we hear the phrase mental health a lot. And that's something that's changed over my lifetime. It used to be something I would hear about every now and then, and now all the time we're hearing the phrase mental health. What is mental health and who does it affect?
Okay, great question. So mental health is very similar to physical health or spiritual health. It's part of who we are. Having mental health, everyone has it, and we have varying degrees of mental health like we do physical health. So when our mental health is strong, we are able to function, think clearly, we have agility to move in and out of our daily relationships and our tasks. And when our mental health is a little bit more frail, we tend to falter, we slip up, we get lax, we aren't on point.
Now, one of the words I hear often associated with mental health is depression. Can you define depression for us?
Okay, well, I'm going to read my definition that I have for depression. Depression is a mood disorder with persistent feelings of sadness, loss of interest, and it affects how we think, feel, and behave, and it leads to a variety of mental health issues. That is depression.
And we're going to talk more about depression a little bit later, but there's a few more terms I want to get some definition around. And the next one is anxiety.
Okay. Anxiety is actually a really good body response to our environment. It's needed. It helps us relate to our environment. And it's only when we get stuck in a cycle of anxiety that it can become a little bit of a problem.
That makes sense. So there may be times where it's entirely appropriate to feel
very
anxious.
Very much so.
And it would only become a problem then when that defense mechanism comes in when we don't need it.
Right.
Okay. And then the next term I wanted to get defined was trauma. What is trauma?
Okay. Well, here we go. Trauma, simply put, is an injury. So it can be a physical injury, it can be emotional, it can be mental, and it can be spiritual. We can suffer from trauma in all of those areas.
Now, I know what a physical injury looks like. I've unfortunately had a few of them. And usually there's, some evidence on the outside, and it's pretty measurable and obvious. What does a mental injury look like?
Wow. It can take lots of different forms. But a mental injury is, the most significant part of it is that it's hidden. And we have the opportunity to stifle it or to allow it to come to the forefront for a little while. And then if we have a mental injury that is stifled too often, for too long, it will just arrive and show up at the least inopportune times.
Now, what does that arrival look like? If there's some sort of a past hurt or pain that gets ignored and put to the side, and it sounds like that is possible for a period of time, and when that period of time expires or wears out, what does that look like?
Well, it looks like, I'm sure you've heard the word trigger.
I have.
Okay, so we can get triggered by anything that is reminiscent of that injury. It could be a sound, it could be a smell, it could be seeing something, it could be a feeling, again, that comes up. And any one of those things can trigger something inside of us that will make that trauma flare back up.
So it sounds like if putting a past hurt or a past pain away to be dealt with later implies that there is an opportunity to deal with it. There is an opposite effect. So what would that look like if someone were to say, yeah, there are some things that they've put aside, and I've noticed that maybe at times it's starting to come out, or it hasn't yet, and I know at some point it will. What would a step look like be to addressing that mental or emotional injury?
Well, the first step to addressing any kind of an injury is to acknowledge that it's occurred. And the second step is to ask for help. So those are the two most important things. And then however the person is comfortable is how we proceed in addressing how those things take place.
So it sounds like there might not be one right or wrong way, but the way that it affects that person personally is relevant and valid in determining a course of action?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So all types of responses to trauma in our lives also have many different types of responses and therapies and ways that can help people to integrate healing into their life.
Now, what are a few other forms of mental health struggles that are common besides, say, depression, anxiety, and trauma, all of which we'll come back to a little later? What are some other struggles that you hear of regularly?
Oh, well, so many. There are many different types of anxiety disorders. There are different types of mood disorders. And of course, there are things like substance abuse, eating disorders. All of those types of things come under mental health issues.
And what is a common misunderstanding about these and other mental health struggles? What's something that you think people really miss that you wish they understood in a different way?
I think the most important thing that people miss in when we talk about mental health is we assume that mental health is something that is bad, that is weak, that it's an illness. And it's actually health. It's health and wellness, and we all have it. And we all live in a cycle where we are strong for a time and weaker for a time. And that's part of the human condition. So it's a fallacy if we think that, that just affects those people, not us. It affects all of us.
So every single person has a degree of mental health, the same way that everyone has a degree of physical health, and that if you find yourself in a spot where you would say I am healthy, I've been well, the same way that you might be healthy and well with your body for a time and then later encounter difficulties, the same could be true for our brains, our emotions. Is that what I'm hearing?
Absolutely.
Now, one of the questions I got from one of our students, I told them I was going to be talking to you and give them the opportunity to ask whatever they were wondering. And one asked, what is a good step one to pull myself out of depression? And maybe as a bit of a precursor, could you explain For those who haven't experienced clinical depression, what does that feel like? So first, paint a bit of a picture of what depression can look like, and then what would be a good first step?
Well, again, first thing is that we all experience bouts of depression. It's very, very normal. And the most important thing is to realize that. It's only when we get stuck in a cycle that we realize somehow it is affecting how we live and how our outlook is in our day-to-day life, in our job, at school, with relationships. Things that used to bring us joy just don't anymore. It changes the patterns, like physical patterns of eating and sleeping, things like that. So the most important thing is first of all to realize we all have moments where we are disengaged, feeling sad, and that's okay. It's only when we get stuck. When we get stuck in a cycle like that, and it tends to affect for a longer period of time, then we need to look at, is there something here that I need some help with? So again, it's acknowledge and it's ask for help. Asking for help is the bravest thing that anyone can ever do in the world. Asking for help.
Now, when you say asking a question is brave, what that implies to me is that it requires courage. Why is it worth it? Why should someone face that fear and that uncomfortability and take that step? What's on the other side of that sacrifice?
Well, why someone should take the step is because it's harder to stay stuck than to move through it. And just like so many things in life, when we stand at the edge and we look across a chasm, it just looks daunting and it looks huge and it looks too hard, and we don't know where we can ever find the strength to take that first step off into the unknown. But that's what we do when we come together as a group, share our weaknesses and say, I realize now is a time I need help. Then others can come alongside of us and support us as we take that step. And when we take that first step, we realize that it wasn't as difficult maybe as we thought it would be, but it's still, you have to take the step. You have to take the step. And if you don't, you linger on the edge. It's like trying to dive into the water and it's freezing cold and you know it's going to be cold and you don't want to do it. And you're suffering on the outside, not taking the step. But taking the step, you just do it. And you find that there are people around to help and support you. God is there taking that step with you. And it's connective. There's community found in it.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that explanation. And the times in my life that I've reached out and asked for help, I have found the scariest and hardest part was the moment before asking. And it was momentous after that. And I hear a focus on togetherness and community in your answers, which makes it sound like to me that isolation might be dangerous for us. And isolation has been a theme of many of our lives for the past year or so, and for many of us, maybe even longer than that. Talk to me a little bit about the danger of isolation.
Isolation is incredibly dangerous because it makes us think that we are alone and that we are different than anyone else. And we aren't. We are the human condition here, all of us together. We all share the same needs, the same wants, the same desires in life, the same passions, the same suffering. And it's a way of becoming weaker and weaker the more isolated we become. We find strength And when one of us is weak, the others can come around and give energy and support and camaraderie to the one who is struggling, because only right now it's their turn. In a few weeks or a few months, it's going to be someone else's turn in the group, and we need the other to come around and to support and encourage. And there is such a need. We were formed for community. We were created in love by God for love. We need each other.
Now, during this particular time, if you're watching later, this is being recorded in mid-January of 2021, and we're currently dealing with some restrictions that are asking us to avoid any socialization of any kind. So it's, school for our students, work for our professionals, and that's it. What are some practical ways that one could fight off isolation and take a step towards togetherness with our current options? What would you advise?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess it's specific to everyone's ideal.
It would be unique from person to person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some people love social media. Some people love to get out in nature. I mean, there are so many different ways that we can connect. We need to be creative with how we connect. We took so much of our connection time for granted before COVID.
No kidding. Yeah.
And now I see COVID invites us into this creative way of living in the world, of looking at things differently, of being more intentional with our connections that we make. And living with immense gratitude.
I appreciate that insight. I think obstacles can often feel like an offense, and they can be definitely, damaging, and at the same time invite creativity and innovation, perseverance, opportunities to grow, and patience, which are all beautiful things. I think also probably not what people want, but what we're getting.
Right.
And I guess sometimes what we want and what we get need to be different.
Yes.
So the Bible gives us commands like don't worry or take joy. So if I'm struggling with depression or an anxiety disorder and things like worry seem really familiar and joy seems really far off, does that mean that I have a weak faith and that I don't know God well, or is there something a little more to that?
There's probably a lot more to it than I could ever imagine. But I know that God loves us. God passionately pursues us. And what we call a command to be happy and to not worry is God really saying to us, trust me. Just lean into me and trust me. And God has such compassion for us when we don't, and when we find it difficult, and when we struggle with that. God is a compassionate God and a loving God. And to have scriptures that say to us, have joy. We can have joy. Joy isn't happy.
Absolutely.
Joy is something that isn't stolen by cancer. It's not stolen by the death in a family or by loss of a job. Those are all really difficult situations, but those situations don't have to steal our joy. Joy is something that lives deep, deep down inside of us, and it's a constant reminder that God is with us always, deeply with us.
I already touched on this a bit, but I'd love to hear it again, just in a little bit of a different way. For our students who are struggling in a big way with their mental health and wondering, how does God respond to me? In the midst of my struggle, as I feel far away, as I feel in a fog, in a cloud, as I feel isolated, how does God respond to me?
God responds with love. God responds with openness, like the arms that are wide open waiting for you to come. And sometimes we come timidly. Sometimes we come with great anger. Sometimes we come with discouragement. But that doesn't change how God stands waiting for us to come. God never leaves us. God doesn't turn his face away from us until we can smile again. God is always with us and waiting for us to just wake up and to be aware that God is with us. God isn't afraid of our big emotions.
I love that. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I think that's a very, very valuable understanding.
Yeah. God created all of our emotions, and there's not one of them that is inappropriate to God. They are part of our human condition, and God loves our honesty. He loves our vulnerability, because that is living in a truthful relationship. And God is not afraid of our anger, even if it's directed to him. And so I think God values our honesty more than he is ever a finger-wagging God, saying, don't do that. That's not right. You can't be angry at me. No.
I think it's very common for us to say that we know that God values relationship more than performance. But we can say that and still have worked into us a little bit this understanding that we've got to perform a certain way to have God's approval or love. And I think you've explained really well and painted a picture for us of what it looks like to be in relationship rather than performance, which involves bringing whatever you have and trusting that as the one who created those emotions, he's already aware of what's going on and he's open to it. Yeah. I appreciate that reminder. Yeah. And as we close, as someone who works in the mental health and wellness field, what is something you would love for us to know? Leave us with a thought or an encouragement.
A thought or an encouragement. That would be to live aware, to live awake, to pay attention to what's going on inside of you, to be compassionate to yourself, to be gentle, and when you can be that way towards yourself, you can also be that way towards others and hold that space for other people.
Great. I appreciate that so much, Kat. Thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation with us and share your insight, your wisdom, your experience, and remind us how we were created, who we were created by, and take some of the pressure off of us that we've put on ourselves. That's one thing I really appreciate that you've done during this conversation is reminding us some of the pressure we feel like we have on us. We've put there ourselves. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today for Youth TV. We have study questions available on our website linked in the description. You can use them to reflect on what we heard today. And we also have some weekly Zoom meetings in small groups and discussions about these videos so you can catch up as well. If you'd like to get in contact with us or have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on any of our social media platforms or by email. If we can pray for you or support you in any way, please let us know. And have a great week.